Lukács' History and Class Consciousness was originally published in 1923. Before Lukács, many thinkers treated Marxism merely as an economic formula or a rigid set of scientific laws about the inevitable collapse of capitalism. Lukács changed everything by bringing philosophy, culture, and human consciousness back into the heart of Marxist theory. He asked a burning question: if capitalism is inherently exploitative and unstable, why hasn't the working class revolution happened everywhere already? What is blocking human awareness and how can it be unlocked? Even if modern science proved every single one of Marx's specific economic predictions wrong, a serious Marxist should not abandon Marxism. Why? Because according to Lukács, orthodox Marxism does not blindly believe in this or that specific conclusion written by Marx. Orthodox Marxism refers exclusively to Marx's scientific method, dialectical materialism. What is the method? Lukács defines it through a key concept: the category of totality. In everyday life and in mainstream capitalist science, reality is broken down into isolated facts, separate academic departments, and independent pieces of data. Economics is treated as separate from politics. Politics is seen as separate from culture. History is treated as just a random timeline of events. This separation is a massive illusion. Capitalist society is an interconnected whole, a totality. You cannot understand a single factory, a law, a political speech, or an artistic trend unless you see it as a vital part of the global capitalist system. The dialectical method is the intellectual tool that allows us to see the invisible threads connecting all these isolated pieces into a moving historical whole. Therefore, to be an orthodox Marxist means to analyze society from the standpoint of the totality, uncovering the hidden structural contradictions that drive history forward. To explain why people accept capitalism, Lukács takes Marx's brief concept of commodity fetishism and expands into a comprehensive social theory called reification. Under capitalism, the primary way people interact with the world is through buying and selling commodities, goods made for the market. As capitalism develops, the commodity form spreads into every single corner of human life. It stops being just an economic mechanism and becomes a psychological and social blueprint. What happens during reification? Human activities, human labor, and human social relations are transformed into things. They take on an independent, autonomous life of their own and begin to rule over human beings. Let us use a simple example. If you build a table with your own hands, that table is an expression of your creative energy and time. But in a capitalist market, that table becomes a commodity with a price tag. It enters a market world where prices fluctuate based on abstract laws of supply and demand. Suddenly, the table and the system of markets surrounding it appears to you not as a product of human labor but as a cold national force. Human relations start looking like relations between objects, and objects start looking like they have human power over us. The most dangerous effect of reification is that it makes a historically created man made system look like an unchangeable law of nature. People look at the capitalist economy, the stock market, or poverty, and they think, well, that is just how the world works. It is like gravity or the weather, we cannot change it. Lukács calls this the reified mindset. People forgot that every machine, every dollar, every law, and every economic index was created by human activity. Because they forget this, they treat the social world as frozen alien environment that they must passively adapt to rather than a human creation that they can collectively transform. Reification does not just affect how we view things, it breaks the human soul into pieces. Lukács explains that capitalism requires an extreme division of labor. Workers are forced to specialize in tiny, repetitive tasks. In a modern office or factory, you are not a whole human being using your full creative capacity. You are a specialized cog in a vast machine. Your time, your attention, and your skills are quantified, measured, and sold as discrete objects. Even your consciousness becomes reified. This fragmentation isolates individuals from each other, destroys their sense of connection to the social totality, and breeds a deep sense of alienation. Lukács does not critique factory life, he applies his theory of reification to the history of Western philosophy. He examines classical German philosophy from Descartes and Kant to Hegel to show that capitalist philosophy suffers from structural blind spots, which he calls antinomies, meaning insoluble contradictions. Thinkers like Kant tried to construct perfect rational systems to explain human knowledge and reality. However, Kant eventually hit a wall. While we can know how things appear to us, phenomena, we can never know the ultimate reality of things as they are in themselves, the thing in itself. Lukács asks, why did the greatest minds of bourgeois society hit this philosophical wall? His answer is brilliant. The philosophical thing in itself is nothing other than the reified commodity form. Because bourgeois philosophers live within a reified capitalist world, their minds are trapped by the separation of things. They view the world as a collection of isolated, frozen facts. They try to understand reality through abstract contemplation rather than practical action because they cannot see society as a human made historical totality. Their philosophy is permanently fractured by dualisms, the split between the subject, that is the thinker, and the object, the world, the split between freedom, morality, and necessity, the cold laws of nature, and the split between theory, abstract ideas, and praxis, real world action. Classical philosophy reached its absolute limit in Hegel. Hegel realized that history is a dynamic process driven by contradictions, and he tried to heal these philosophical splits by introducing a subject object that creates and knows reality. However, because Hegel was an idealist, he claimed this subject object was an abstract world spirit. Philosophy cannot solve its problems by escaping into abstract spirit. These philosophical puzzles can only be solved when a real concrete social force dissolves reification in the material world. Next, Lukács talks about class consciousness. To understand how to break through reification, we must understand how Lukács theorizes human awareness under capitalism. Lukács makes a vital theoretical distinction between two types of consciousness. First, actual psychological consciousness is what real individual workers happen to be thinking, feeling, or worrying about at any given moment on a Tuesday afternoon. Example, worries about rent, personal drama, mainstream media narratives. Second, imputed class consciousness is a structural theoretical concept. It refers to the thoughts, insights, and awareness that the working class as a whole would have if they fully understood their objective position within the capitalist totality. Lukács is not interested in running an opinion poll to see what workers currently think. He wants to know what workers can and must think when they break through the ideological illusions of capitalism. Under the weight of reification, both the capitalist class, the bourgeoisie, and the working class, the proletariat, are trapped in false consciousness. They see the world upside down. The capitalist class looks at a recession and blames it on bad luck, a bad politician, or a natural cycle because they cannot admit that their own system is fundamentally contradictory. The capitalists are structurally blinded by their class position. They need to believe that capitalism is eternal and natural to justify their wealth and power. Therefore, the capitalist class can never achieve true, unreified knowledge of the totality. Their consciousness is permanently limited by their need to preserve the status quo. If the capitalist class is structurally blinded, who can break the spell of reification? This is where Lukács introduces his most celebrated concept, the standpoint of the proletariat. Working class occupies a unique, historically unprecedented position that makes them the identical subject object of history. Whereas the capitalist class sees the world as frozen, natural thing like laws trapped in reification, the proletarian standpoint realizes we are the labor that animates these things. We can unfreeze the world. How does a worker experience capitalism? A worker is forced to sell their labor power on the market. This means that under capitalism, the worker experiences themselves directly as a commodity. Their time, energy, and physical body are bought and sold like coal, grain, or steel. This experience is brutal, but it contains a profound philosophical advantage. When a capitalist looks at a factory, they see things, inputs, machinery, and abstract labor costs. But when a worker looks at their work, they realize my lived experience, my life force, and my time are being transformed into these cold objects. The worker realizes that the commodity form is not a natural law. It is a live process of exploitation, extracting energy from human bodies. Therefore, when the worker achieves self consciousness, they become a commodity that understands its own value and historical origin. The worker is the object of capitalism, bought and sold, but by realizing this, they become the subject that understands how the whole system works. From the standpoint of the proletariat, the frozen, thing like world of reification begins to resolve. The working class can see that behind every price tag, behind every factory wall, and behind every financial index lies hidden human labor. If human activity built this world, then human activity can change it. The proletariat does not look at society with abstract contemplation, they look at it with an eye towards survival and liberation. By liberating themselves, they are forced to dismantle the entire system of commodity production, thereby liberating all of humanity from the illusions of reification. The final theoretical aspect is the practical realization of this awareness. Lukács is not interested in quiet library studies. He insists on the unity of theory and praxis, practical transformative action. As we discussed, capitalism splits theory apart from practice. Intellectuals write abstract ideas in books, while workers perform mindless physical actions in factories. True class consciousness is not an academic lecture that you read and memorize. True consciousness is a live act of praxis. The moment the working class understands its objective position in the totality, that understanding alters their behavior. Knowing that you are the creator of social reality changes how you act, and acting changes the reality you know. Theory and practice become a single self correcting movement. But how does this abstract imputed class consciousness become a real living force among millions of fragmented workers? Lukács fills this gap by developing a sophisticated theory of the Communist Party, heavily inspired by Lenin. Lukács explicitly rejects the idea that the party should be a collection of elite dictators ruling over the masses. He also rejects the opposite idea that the workers will spontaneously figure out the entire global totality on their own without organization. Instead, Lukács defines a party as the organizational form of proletarian class consciousness. The party is the structural space where the everyday fragmented experiences of individual workers are gathered, debated, and synthesized into a clear, unified understanding of the global capitalist totality. The party's job is to rip away the reified veils that keep workers isolated from one another by profession, nation, or skill level. It acts as an educational strategic compass, converting abstract historical knowledge into sharp, flexible, practical action on the ground. Through their iron discipline and total commitment of the party, the individual worker escapes their reified isolation and becomes an active, conscious co author of human history. Let us conclude by summarizing what we listened. First, capitalism is an illusion machine. Through the process of reification, capitalism transforms human actions into things and makes a historical man made system look like a permanent law of nature. It breaks our world and our minds into isolated pieces. Second, the truth is the whole. We can only break the spell by using the dialectical method to see society as an interconnected totality driven by human labor and historical change. Third, the working class is the key. Because workers are treated as commodities, they have a unique structural viewpoint. By becoming aware of their own exploitation, they unlock the secret of the entire system, transforming themselves from passive objects of history into active subjects capable of building a free, unalienated human world. Lukács reminds us that our social world is not fixed in stone, it is alive, changing, and built by our own hands, and therefore it can always be remade. Thank you.